Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. So this session, as Nikki says, is all about how to deliver strategic goals using Viva and Teams. So without further ado, let's So who am I? So I'm a technical architect at something called the Microsoft Technology Centre in London. So I do work for Microsoft. Prior to that, I've been doing a lot of different things, including being an MVP, but also being a Viva Explorer and focusing in on how Viva can help us with employee experience, but also things like productivity. So in this session, I want to talk a bit about OKRs. I want to talk a bit about how they're set and how they can be tracked. And a lot of this comes from sessions that I've run with customers in the Microsoft Technology Centre. So just a quick bit about that. So we're basically a global network. We help organizations to understand how they can implement technology. So kind of pre-sales, but really understanding where the business challenges are and how they can actually really understand technology being implemented into their own organization. And Viva Goals comes out as a very common output from these sessions because we're often talking about, well, okay, we've talked about all these wonderful things in a workshop. How do we then take it forward? How do we then measure the progress towards actually transforming an organization? So let's start. The first question we get is, what are OKRs? It's a wonderful term, OKR. So it stands for objectives, key results, and initiatives. We'll talk a bit about the terminology a little later on and how that can be adapted for different organisations, because culturally these terms have different significances in different organisations. But they've been developed as a methodology, the OKR methodology, over many decades. So I'm going to carry on using these terms for the time being. So let's dive into what is an objective. So an objective needs to be inspirational. It really is it's a concise statement about what we're trying to achieve. I will say that every employee should be able to understand this. This should be a clear and easy way for an organization to describe the what. The what are we trying to achieve? So it should really be inspirational. It should be able to be described by all employees. They should be able to explain what it means. On the right-hand side, I have some examples of objectives. These are taken from various sources. I'll share the references at the end of the session. But things like delight our customers, that might be something that we're trying to achieve. We might want to put a bit more flesh around that to really kind of determine, well, what haven't we been doing up to now and how are we going to take that forward? But we might have things like get rid of our service backlog. That might be a clear objective that we want to achieve. So therefore, we need to work out how do we get rid of our service backlog. Delivering a world-class customer support experience. It's that's really kind of using emotive language. It's setting out an objective that maybe is a bit of a stretch objective. And I think this is where, when we talk about objectives, they do need to be stretches. They need to be things that we are transforming the organization. Win the World Cup. That could be a good one for a football team or for any sports team. Building reputation, captivating and capture visitors with a new website. All of these aren't necessarily saying what we are going to do to achieve it, but they are goals that we can then bring together different people in our organization and align them. And that's really important for an objective. We need it to be something where we can align different areas of the organization, so we all have a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve. If I think about an organization with multiple teams, if I said that we're going to delight our customers, I might then say, okay, so the sales team, what are you going to do that? We might then have a service desk. What are they going to do? We might have a consultancy team delivering services to customers. We might ask the same thing of them. So that one objective of delighting our customers could actually span across multiple parts of the organization, and they could all be working to that shared objective. And that's really fundamental here. We're talking about objectives that are clearly understood, are clearly communicated easily across different teams, and that different teams can pull together to try and achieve these objectives. So if we've got our objective set, we then need to think about the next part, which is the key results. And the key results in this case is, what are we trying to measure? How are we demonstrating that we are on the journey towards achieving our objective? So we want it to be clearly measurable. In a lot of cases, how we measure it might actually be quite difficult. That might be something that, we don't necessarily have the metrics to hand, but we want to aspire to measure in a particular way so that we can really prove that we are actually achieving our objectives. So this is really the how. How do we go about achieving our objectives? Now, it's important to notice that when we're talking about key results, we are talking about things that are aligned to achieving an objective. An objective might last a period of time, but we want our results to be achievable within a finite period of time. So they're not KPIs that we use for performance reviews that are consistent and ongoing. Those tend to be managed in a different way. These are things that we are all pulling together to achieve over the next quarter, for example. So we don't want them to be constant. We don't want them to be forever measures that we're always working towards. We want them to be things that we think we can achieve in the next period of time that we're measuring. And periods of time, in most cases, tends to be quarters, but we might have larger objectives that are over a year. And we might have, as was on the previous slide from the Gates Foundation, eradicating malaria by 2040. So we might have much longer term measures as well. So when we think about some of those examples that we had on the previous slide, delight our customers. So we might look at saying, actually, we want to increase our net promoter score by 20%. So that's really clear. We have a starting point, which is whatever the current value is, and we know we want to change it and move it up by 20%. 60% of customers make monthly orders. So, we might need to think, well, what is the definition of a customer? How do we measure that 60%? Are they people who visit our website? Are they people who have made orders? So we need to be thinking about how we measure some of these so that we know that we've got a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve. When we look at these, it's important to note that we're trying to balance these out so that we don't have unintended consequences. So, if I said delight our customers, well, that means that we are, selling a particular product, and that's going to demonstrate that we're delighting our customers. We could work around that and mess with the numbers to achieve those higher sales. So we need to balance them to say, well, actually, reducing the complaints, increasing our net promoter score, and making sales. Those are things that complement each other. So we're not just making sales, but everybody's really unhappy because nothing's delivered on time or the quality goes down. We're balancing out to say we're making a sale, but we also know that that customer is happy and they're going to return, and we can demonstrate that because we've got clearly stated key results that balance out those factors. So it's important to recognize that we need to balance out what we're trying to achieve here with a volume, a quality, a quantity. However we want to balance that out, we need to make sure that we're looking at all of those factors together so that we're not just going in one direction and having unintended consequences. So once we've got our objective, we know then how we are going to measure that. So the last part that we need to talk about here is initiatives. So with the OKRs, the O is the objectives, the key results, the KR, the initiatives. This is kind of where it starts to change in terms of the type of organization, the type of objective, the type of key results, and what do we actually want to do to actually achieve that key result. If we talk about, changing the NPS score for customers, we then need to think about, well, what do we actually need to do to make that happen? So this is where the initiatives come in. So initiatives are the activities that we need to carry out. So they might be projects. We might be making a change to our website. We might be making a change to the way we handle service desk tickets. We might be, rolling out a new product, rolling out Windows 11, making a change to the way people work. There's all sorts of different things, which is why the word initiative is used here, because it kind of covers up all of those different types of activities that we might be looking at. And this is where we need to be starting to track, well, what are we as a team doing in terms of how are we delivering those initiatives? Are they on track? And also, are the outcomes of those initiatives actually influencing the key results that we want to measure? So we've got to be very careful when we think about initiatives, not to be thinking that these are tick box exercises. Well, we've carried out all of the tasks in our project, so therefore we're done. Actually, we're still looking back at those key results. We still need to make sure that all of these initiatives are oriented around those key results, because that's actually what they're all there to do. So I've got some examples up here. So projects, we might be implementing a feature, carrying out an experiment to see whether we get better customer feedback. We might be changing the way people work. So, adoption is a key thing for most organizations when we're talking about technology changes. As Sari was saying previously, the ways of working, the wow, how do we influence the way people work, the way they change? And we might have discrete actions. So we might actually be saying, well, as part of the process, we need to carry out a workshop. We need to get approval for a budget to start a bigger project. So all of these could be things that we need to measure as being completed, and then to see what the impact will be on the key results that we're trying to set. So when we talk about an OKR, we're talking about, sometimes it's an OKR set, which is a set of an objective, maybe 3 key results that are related to that objective. That makes up an OKR set. Then what we do, the initiatives, those really drive how we achieve the outcomes, achieve the key results. So let's think, how are these set? It's an interesting challenge when you get organizations where they say, well, we're going to use OKRs. So they then need to think, well, what are they actually trying to achieve? So let's think about this. We're looking at different things here. So we might have a company strategy. So the board might have said, we want to do this. They may have publicized that to shareholders, to their key stakeholders. Whoever is setting the company strategy, we might have transformations that have been set out that over the coming year, this is what we're going to try and achieve. So that's always a good starting point. We want our OKR sets to align to those company strategies and to contribute to them. If we're doing something that goes in an opposite direction, that doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. So we want to think about, how do we take a company strategy and generate OKR sets? And we can do that within Viva Goals. So I'll show you how you can do that. We need to think about who defines the OKR sets. And this is quite an interesting challenge, because we don't want it to be completely hierarchical. We don't want the board to be saying, right, these are the objectives and the key results that need to be achieved. We actually want them to set the objective, and then we want to almost delegate it down to say, okay, if we've got an objective, each team can understand, well, what key results would they want to aim for in order to contribute to that objective being met? So delight our customers, we might have a sales team who are setting their own key results to achieve that objective. We might have a customer service team who are doing the same thing. We might have a product development team who are doing the same thing, but all of their key results would be slightly different. So we want to think about it in terms of, what different units are we using? We're using leadership, we're using business units, we're using teams. Those are the people who might be setting the top level OKRs, the objectives, and then the key results being delegated down so that each team is basically contributing. We need to think about how ambitious these are. We don't want these to be standard things that we're trying to achieve. We want this to be stretch targets. So some approaches say, have 50% confidence at the start of the quarter that you're going to be able to achieve these. That way, you're going to potentially achieve all of them, but actually you're setting expectation that these aren't going to be easy to achieve. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to do the right things. You're going to have to be innovative. It also means that there isn't necessarily any sandbagging going on, where we're just going to focus on things that we know that we can achieve in order to get 100% achievement rate for all of them. So you need to manage that. That's a cultural thing within an organization. How do we set that expectation? We then need to work together to actually work towards achieving all of these targets. So We need to monitor progress. We need to pull together to achieve these. And what that means is we might have, if we go back to the delighting customers one, we might have the sales team and the customer service team, understanding what they're each trying to do and working together to share that experience of, well, what do we actually need to do to make the customer happy? So we want teams to be able to work together to achieve these results. And we might want to adapt. So we might want to say, actually, we were 50% confident of meeting a particular key result at the start of the quarter. That's now gone down to we're 25% confident on that one. What do we need to change in order to get our confidence levels back up that we're actually going to meet it? So we do need to be able to adapt to the way we're going to deliver these. So when we think about how they're set, there's all sorts of different ways that you can pull this information out and identify it, but fundamentally we need to get it into a format where we can then use it within the tools that we have to manage these. And sometimes the tools need to adapt, and sometimes the processes that you're using adapt to the tools to get the most out of them. So in this session, I'm going to talk about Viva Goals. So it's part of the Viva suite. So we're going to talk about the settings in Viva Goals and how they relate to the types of OKRs that we might be working towards. So when we think about the Viva Goals setup, we're thinking about a tenant level. So our whole organization, we have security settings, we have configuration in there. We have integrations as well, where we can configure what integrations we want to use. The integrations mean that we can use other tools to track progress. And we can get data to automatically update the progress towards our key results. And we'll go through that in a bit. We can have multiple organizations. So where we might have an overall company set of OKRs, we might also have different organizations that are set up in order to manage discretely sets of OKRs. So you might be in a multinational organization where you've got different regions that have different strategic objectives for each quarter. Depending on the size of the organization, multiple organizations isn't necessarily a need for everybody. We then also have terminology. How do we manage the terminology that we're using to describe these? So where I said the objective, the key results, we might want to change that. And I'll show you how you can do that so that it fits more with the organizational culture in your company. We then have an organization, and this is really the container of the objectives and the key results, the initiatives. So we have permissions, we can pull in different people into it. We can set up different teams that we can allocate ownership to. We can set up time periods. Do we want to deliver these every quarter, every 6 months, every year? We can set those time periods up. Again, we can set up notifications. How do we want people to be notified and prompted? What sort of integrations do we need? We can also change the model in terms of, do we want to nest objectives under key results? So do we want, the IT team to be setting their own objectives underneath a key result for the organization? So we can set that up as well. We can talk about scoring. So how confident are we? How do we measure the progress towards a key result? And again, we've got the terminology in there as well. We then talk about teams. So how do teams work together? So this starts to be more of the ways of working. What are they doing? So we've got permissions, but we also want check-in frequency. How often do we want people updating the progress that they're making? And this is where we start to see this is, much more the ways of operating, the operating model for particular teams. And then we have people, the hard part. How do we get people to actually pull together and work together? So, I've got adopt, monitor, reinforce, standard sort of ADKAR approach to how do we actually get people to change the way they work. So how do we track these? So we define the objectives, we define the key results, we communicate. So we need to communicate OKR sets, we need to monitor the progress, and then we need to be updating the behavior. So that's all well and good. Let's flip over to a demo and see what this actually looks like. So if I find the right screen to start with. So let's start in Teams. So I'm in Teams here, and I've got Viva Goals over on the left-hand side here. So if I come into Viva Goals, what it will open up with should open up with my OKRs. And this is my personal view. This is things that I am the owner of. And so I'm seeing here, I've got the targets, which is, so that says that's an objective. So I've got my O's, I've got in here my key results, and underneath that, I will have my initiatives. So I've got 3 levels here. For each of these, I can see that I've got an owner, I've got a team, so I can associate these with teams, and I've got status and progress, so I can see where these are, and these will roll up. So if I come in here, and let's do a quick check-in on this one. I'll come in here and I might say, oh, I can't do that. Now, there is a good reason for that. That is updated directly from project. So if I come down and look at this one, say check in here, this one isn't set with an initiative. So this is just set as manual. So I can say user satisfaction. So let's put that up to 95. I can put a note in here and I can say extensive coverage achieved and check in. Now, when I do that, that will update and it'll say on track, and it's updated and it will say when that last update was, so today. So if I come in and have a look at the whole thing here, so I open the full page view, then I can see that for that particular key results, I've got tracking. So this is where I wanted it to get to. So this is set for this quarter, starting in January, finishing in March. If I want to get to my target of 80%, then that's where it should map to. I can see there are no child items. If there were child items, I can see them. I can add a child item in here as well. So if I want to, I can add an initiative. So if this weren't working, I might say, let's say run a communication plan, run a communication campaign. So I might add that in. I might say, what's that going to do? So I could say, well, what do I want to do for this? This is going to do something. So my target is to increase. So my coverage is increasing from 60 to 90. So that's got percent. I could say dollars, pounds, euros. So if I put 90 in there. And then in here, I can say, well, how do I want to do this? Do I want to update this manually? Or do I want to connect it to something? So we'll talk a bit about the integrations in a little while, but I could say for this one, I want it to connect to Planner. So in this case, I'm set up a Planner board. So let's do my modern work planner. Now, interestingly, it goes to buckets. So it says any bucket or a particular bucket. So if I've got tasks in a bucket, it will say which bucket. I could use labels. So in Planner, where you've got the nice colorful labels, I could use that to say, I'm going to measure on a particular label and any task that's in that label. Or I could look at particular tasks that I've got in there and say, well, actually, I'm going to say that let's do share survey and share recommendations. So once those are done, then this will be done. I could assign it to somebody. So let's assign it to me to own. And we'll say percent of tasks completed. So one of those is completed. So I'm 50%. So I can add an initiative in and add that directly in underneath my task, my key objective here. So now I've got a child item there. So what I'm doing here is basically looking at my OKRs, the ones that I'm essentially liable for, I'm responsible for, I'm participating in as an owner. And I can see my objectives, my key results, and the initiatives in here as well. Now, I can also see Tranta is the name of the organization, so I can see all of them. If I want to, I can look at dashboards. So I can see dashboards in here of, well, actually, all of the check-ins that have taken place. Where are we? What's taking place in here? I can drill into these and see more information in here. So it gives me a good way to actually see this. I can also share this as well. So if I want to copy a link, I can copy that out to somebody. And if I want to present this, I can actually just change it into a present page. So, oh, something went wrong. Lovely. Demo gods. And what that means is if we're going through this in a team meeting or something, we can see this information and use this to drive our conversations. So when we're looking at this from a perspective of the team, all of these are teams. So if I come into my operations team, I can look at the objectives that I've got in here that are assigned to this team, and we can work out what are we actually doing to actually deliver on these. So it's a really important way to use the teams and to use that hierarchy to say, we want our teams focusing on different objectives and working out their key results and then working out their initiatives to actually deliver on those key results. So we can drive this quite easily from a team perspective. And when we're looking at these, we can see how we might be actually pulling these together from different locations. So we've got project for the web. So if we're looking at a project for the web to say we want to key tasks that will drive this, then we can use project for the web. We can use planner for these ones. And I'll show you shortly how you can configure other ones as well. So this is where we're in a particular organization called Tranta. We can choose between different organizations. So we might be part of an organization that's related to a region or a global organization. And what we can also do here is we can share. So if I come into here and I use Copilot, I can say generate a summary. So what that will do is it will summarize the information that I'm actually using within Viva Goals, and it should generate a summary of the progress. So between the 1st of January and 21st of February, this is a summary of the progress. So if I wanted to, I could share that with my boss, so I could share it upwards. They should all be able to see this as well, but I can actually say at this point in time, this is the summary of information. What I can also do here is if I want to, where is it? I can share an update as well. So if I want to share an update to my operations team, then it will share it here. So I could be saying, I want to put a summary in here and describe something in here. So this is our weekly status. And I can choose to email it or not to email it, and then I can post that, and that will go out. If I flip over to a browser, let's go to email. So here's one that I did earlier. So I sent out an update. So that's got links to our particular goals. New ones just come through, and I can click on this and just go straight in to the directly in and see. Oh, there we go. Opens up Viva Goals, and it will show Viva Goals straight away. So there's my goal that I've just clicked on, and I can see the status of that goal. I can see the key results and the initiatives that are associated with it as well. So we've got a lot of ways here to be able to communicate out the objectives that we're working towards and the key results that we're working towards. So let me come back over to here and let me just show you. So from the admin side, how do we set this up? So we've got different organizations that we can set up. We can give them owners and we can give them admins. The owners are responsible for them. They will then be able to set them all up and configure them internally. The admins have ownership at this level, so they can delete them. The owners can't delete them at this level. For each of those, we can set up integrations as well. So where we talk about the tools that we might be using to track our progress towards some of these key results, the initiatives, we've got lots of different integrations set up. So in this environment, we've set up Dynamics, Excel, we've got Azure DevOps, and we've got Planner and Project for the Web set up here. So we've got lots of different sources of information. And once we've set those up, those are available, but then they are configured at an organization level. So our organization will set up where do they actually look for those particular sources of information. The other thing that we've got in here is custom terminology. So as I said, we've got at an organization level, we can say, what do we want to call this? So I might say goal versus OKR, objectives, big rock, goal, outcome. So this is really working out how do we use the language that's going to suit our organization to make sure this resonates with them. So those are the key things at the organization level. If I come over to, let's come over to that one. And I come into my organization level configuration. I've got settings in here. Who can see this? So this one's restricted. It's private. It's not visible to everybody in the company. Who can be invited? Anybody. So I've got settings here to say, how do we manage this particular organization? We've then got members, so we can bring in particular members. In this case, we've brought in a group, and that's given us all of the members in here. So we can say we've got one group, and that's for this particular location. We can set up teams. Now, where we're looking over here, we've got sales, operations. So I might say I've got a customer team. Within that, I've got a marketing team and a sales team. I might have a product team that's got an app team within it. So I can have them hierarchical, which allows us to kind of cascade some of these objectives down and to split them between these different teams. And this is basically for ownership and visibility. We can set up time periods in here. So we've got different time periods. So we might have annual, we might have quarterly, and we've got a current time period here. So we can set up quarters, we can set up whatever time periods we want here. And we can also choose to allow team owners to create custom time periods as well. So if we want to, we can allow more autonomy lower down the hierarchy that we go. We can set up notifications. So check-in rhythm. So we're trying to keep people honest. So we're setting up the rhythm to let them get notifications every week. That way they're always on track of, well, they need to check in. They need to be reminded to check in. How do we reinforce these ways of working? And then we've got our integrations. And so this is where I was saying, if I come into DevOps, for example, I can manage this DevOps, and I've got the ability to say a new connection. This one I've got set up to go into two particular, they're both going to the same environment, the same organization, but they're going to different projects within that. So I can set those up. That gives us then the option when we're in a particular initiative to say, I want to use the YAML connection or the non-YAML connection in this case. So we've got different integrations, and the options that we have here are based on that tenant level. What am I allowing people to use, and therefore how do I set up the connections and configure them for my particular organization? We've then got the model. So where I said we could have our objective, our key results, we could have a nested objective under there and then more key results and initiatives. So this is where we have the option to say what structure do we want to allow, and that way we can put all of that in. Our initiatives, so what do we want to do? Do we want health indicators? Do we want to enable workflow? So we can put approvals in here to review check-ins. We can choose how we measure the progress as well. So there's a lot of nuance to how people set this up. By default, it's set up to basically be standard in terms of at risk, behind, on track. We can use committed goals. Some organizations differ between aspirational and committed goals. So there's different ways that we can set this up. And then we can change our custom terminology in here as well. So the other thing that's really powerful here, and I'm conscious of time here, is if I come into into one of my teams and I don't have anything in here, I've got this Copilot option down here. I mean, Copilot, you can't go far without having a conversation about Copilot, can you? So what I can do here is I can do something like create an OKR from a document. So what I've done in advance is set up a document. So I've got a strategy document. So we said let's align to our strategy, our corporate strategy. So this has got some key things in here. And what I can actually do is if I come in here, I can say create OKRs from a document. Weirdly, it says upload from this device, which is a bit strange. But if I choose this document, okay, I need to close it down from here. Then come back and open it. Then, demo gods. So that was working before. Let's try that again quickly and just see. So basically what this will do is it will generate, if it works, it will generate a set of OKRs. No, okay, demo gods aren't smiling on me now. And it will allow me to actually generate from a document. So let's just close that down and do something else. So help me generate OKRs. So what I can also do here is say, I've closed that. Let's do create a new version of our app that needs to be easier to use. And if I put that in, Copilot will take the information that we put in. That's obviously quite a brief one. And okay, it needs more information. Excellent. Demo gods are always fun, aren't they? Increase user numbers. Reduce errors and complaints. And increase NPS score. So hopefully it will craft a response. And the beauty of this is if you put enough information in, it will generate, so it's generated an objective and some key results. And so I can save those and it will then say, okay, where am I going to put them? So I'm going to put them into my customer team. And let's put them in there. And which quarter? So let's put them in, let's put them in this quarter. Yeah. Done, and save those, and it will generate those. So it's taken some of the information. I've not put a lot of detail in, so it's put some information in there, and it's basically taken a wild guess at what numbers does it think I mean. So reduce number of errors from 5 to 2%, decrease number of complaints from 100 to 50. So you might want to tune those a bit to the scale of the system that you're working with, but this allows you to actually generate quite a lot of the information to get a good start of a 10 before you actually start using it. So that's a whirlwind tour of how do we use OKRs. I'm going to come back to the presentation quickly. I'm conscious of time. So next step. So again, thinking about what the vision is, how you get started, prioritize which areas are best for an initial pilot. Think about the objectives that you would use there. How would they most benefit? How can you demonstrate outcomes? If you can measure it, it's a good category to start in. And then start thinking about how do you plan success. So defining success criteria for the use of OKRs and Viva Goals, and then how do you launch it? Where we look at the desired outcomes, we want shared understanding, common alignments. We want stretch targets around the key results, balance to avoid unintended consequences. We want them to be open for transparency, easy to collaborate on. We also want to have regular check-ins and resolve risks and change the habits, change the ways of working. There are some key resources to look at. So Measure What Matters by John Doerr is well worth reading, as is the associated website, whatmatters.com. Radical Focus by Christina Vodke is also a very good starting point. And there's the Viva Goals blog. And with that, please provide any feedback, and feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And yeah, hopefully you'll get the chance to use some of these Viva Goals and make the most of Viva Goals. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and let me check and see whether there are any questions.
No, there weren't any questions in the chat, but if anyone's got any questions now, feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, please do raise your hand.
Oh, I've got a question in case people are thinking about what to ask. So this is an additional license. So do you need to license everybody that you're adding in as
everybody that uses the Viva Goals interface? Yeah.
And is there a minimum number? So when you say you kind of phase it out, if you had like a team of 10 people you were starting off with, could you start with a small number and then increase over time?
Absolutely. I mean, if you started with a team, yes, it probably takes 2 quarters to kind of get a good feel for how this changes the cadence of work for a team. So starting with a team or two or three teams, get them up and running. Having an OKR champion, somebody like an agile coach, who can really kind of help explain and build the habit of meeting and talking about these is really useful. But yeah, you can certainly start with a team, get them up and running with it, get them working out how they use it each quarter and how it helps them pull together, and then start to scale it out. It's a very similar adoption journey to agile in terms of starting with teams, getting some good practice, getting some people who can champion it within the organization.
I've just had a question from Moretta. One thing that can be hard is to concrete size, I can't pronounce that word,
concretize the goals. Yeah.
Into actionable activities. Any thoughts on ways to help this?
It's a great question, Moretta. I guess being specific is really the key thing. The tool itself really helps with that, actually. So if I come back here, so if I was to say that I was going to add a key result in, the way that it's structured, it's kind of got some help in there. It's kind of got some information. And when you add a metric, it's very much structured around, well, what am I trying to do? What is my target in terms of the change and the number? How am I actually measuring it? And when I'm trying to work through this in workshops, I'm always trying to say that you need to have a starting point and an end point, and you need to be clear on what that change is. So whether you're increasing something, decreasing something, what is it that you're actually aiming to do? Because it needs to be measurable. There are also, if you go in and look at the objectives, there are sample OKRs within Viva Goals. So if I look at the sample OKRs, there's quite a lot in here where you kind of go through company, sales, and it will give you some examples that you can actually start to use and start to, as a starter for 10, that you can actually make use of. So there's quite a lot of examples, and if you do a search for example OKRs, you will find a lot out on the web. But a key thing when you're trying to work through them is an objective something that people can get behind? Is it emotive? Is it something that it's easy to understand? And the key result, is it a tangible measure? Can you measure the difference significantly?
And I've got kind of a follow-on question. So are these, when you set the goals, is it linear? So for example, on the screen there, you've got reduce voluntary attrition from 30% to 10%. So if you're measuring that over a year's period and you've got check-ins every quarter, is it just kind of a linear change? Or can you say, well, actually, I think it's only going to change 1% in the first quarter and it's going to build momentum and it might be another 10% and then another 30%?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a large transformation, then you may very well be saying, you need to get the ball rolling and start to build momentum. So it might be that you're saying, yeah, we're going to start with 10% of people are, our numbers change by 10%, but by the end of the year, we want to achieve a change of 30%. So you might start by saying, well, we need to be able to measure it in the first place and then work towards something, but you can definitely do that over time. Those larger, longer term transformations, a rollout of a product, you might be piloting it. I want to pilot it for the first quarter, and then I want to accelerate the rollout to achieve by the end of the year. My objective might be that I'm going to achieve 100% rollout, but my key results over the year might actually be set each quarter.
Okay.
There's no single way to look at this. It's kind of more of a, how do you get everybody aligned?
Okay. And with the stretch target, are they still part of that same OKR, or would you add that as a secondary one?
They would usually be slightly different. If you've got a set, well, we need to get 100% by the end of the year, then that tends to be more of a, so this is where they talk about committed and uncommitted goals. So a stretch target would tend to be an uncommitted goal where you're setting a target to say, we want to increase our NPS. You're not committing 100% to achieving that. Whereas rolling out a software upgrade, you might be committing to everybody's going to suddenly be using Windows 11 rather than Windows 10. So it'd be a very different kind of expectation of, well, we're not going to get to 90%. That's not going to be good enough. So committed and uncommitted are quite interesting ways to separate the types of goals that you might be actually aiming for.
So any further questions at all for Al here on OKRs and Viva Goals? Well, if there's no more questions, then please do rate this session, because the feedback's really important. I don't know whether you want to put your slide back up with the QR code on it. You've still got it to hand. Yep. And you've now got a break for 13 minutes, and we'll be back at the top of the hour with Chirag Patel talking about handling Microsoft Teams with document management in SharePoint. Thank you, everyone, and I shall see you shortly.
Thank you all.